All right, and this is learning target 5.2.5. So if you are writing this on a separate sheet of paper, make sure you are putting 5.2.5 at the top. All right, now just for the sake of time, we're going to skip right to the nitty gritty. I have this word discriminant, okay? Got this word discriminant, that's our new vocab word today. And we see that this is our discriminant formula. Hey guys, does that look familiar? B squared minus 4AC, does that look familiar? Yes, we just sang it a bunch. It was in our quadratic formula. So if you recognize this, this is actually part of the quadratic formula that is under the square root sign. So our quadratic formula, if you are looking for some reference, don't write this part down, but it would be, this is the part that would be underneath our square root. So it'd look like this. For our discriminant, all we need is this part underneath the square root. We don't need the rest of it. So the thing about this is that, yes, technically you do have to have the discriminant formula memorized, but because it's part of the quadratic formula, if you guys memorize the quadratic formula, you've inadvertently memorized the discriminant formula. You just have to remember that it's the part that's under the square root. Okay, so I'll give everybody a moment. Please, please, please make sure that you get this word down, that you get this is the discriminant formula, and then please make sure you get the actual formula itself. I'll give everybody about 15 seconds here before we move on. Can you guys hear Mr. Kirkowitz? Oh, okay. I was hoping it wasn't too much of a distraction. Good. All right, so here we go. I'm moving on to frame 5 of my Jamboard if you have that pulled up. This is also a very important frame, so make sure you get kind of, again, a brief sketch of what I'm going to put down here in this chart, this whole thing. All right, so there are 3 options with our discriminant. What our discriminant does is that it tells us how many solutions there are to a quadratic. Now our quadratic formula, the whole thing, that whole giant formula, that tells us what the actual solutions are. It finds the actual numbers where it crosses our x-axis. What our discriminant does is it tells you how many of those answers you will have, so how many times it will cross. Now, real quick, just for review's sake, in the chat, can you tell me, other than this word solution, what else could I call it? Remember, there are a couple other words we used. Other than this word solution, what are our other words? Oh, look at you guys. Yep, beautiful. We got roots, zeros, x-intercept. Perfect. Okay. Anything that crosses the x-axis, and this is going to tell us how many times it does that. So there will be 2 solutions if your discriminant is positive. So if you use this formula, you get a positive number. You know you're going to have 2 times that your quadratic crosses the x-axis. So if I draw my quadratic, it might look something like this. I got my parabola, and it's crossing my x-axis twice. It didn't add the 0 for you. That's fine. All right. So if it's a positive number, once you plug it into the formula, you have 2 solutions. Let's say you plug in all your numbers to your formula and you get an answer of 0. This one doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. If you get 0, then that means you have 1 solution. So what that would look like on our graph, our parabola is barely touching our x-axis, and then kind of moves away, just boop, barely touches that axis. Right? And then our last option here, we've dealt with a positive answer, a 0 answer. What do you think that last blank is going to be? Negative. You're so smart. Look at that. We got negative. So if you get a negative answer for our discriminant, this means that you will have no solution. So remember, that means that there are no times that it's crossing the x-axis. So you might have a graph that looks something like that. It just doesn't cross our x-axis. All right, again, I'm going to give you guys, make sure you get this chart down. This is your lifeline today. I'm going to give you all about 15 seconds again, just to make sure your pictures do not have to be perfect. It's just a rough sketch. And if I go too fast and you miss something, let me send you the link for the Jamboard one more time. You can go through that at your leisure, and you can go back if you missed a frame. All right, so here we go. Let's do our first example. Now, these questions, they are not going to say, use the discriminant formula. It is not going to be that straightforward. You need to know what the question is asking you. So in this example, you see that it says identify the number of solutions. That is your indicator that you're using the discriminant formula. And I always spell this wrong, discriminant. If it asks for the solutions themselves, so if it asks for the actual solutions, that's your sign that you're using the full-blown formula, the quadratic formula. If it asks for the number of solutions or how many solutions, then you're going to use just that little part under the square root, the discriminant. So we see that this is our discriminant. That means I'm going to use my formula, b squared minus 4ac. Now, before we start plugging and chugging, let's take a look over on the right-hand side here at my actual equation. What is weird about my equation here? If you know it, you can either raise your hand or throw it in the chat. What is weird about this equation? Yes, thank you, Caitlin. B and C are switched. It's not in standard form. Remember that term? Ooh. It's not written from biggest to smallest. So what I have to do before I start plugging things in, I got to rewrite this in order from biggest to smallest. So 4x squared, your x squared always goes first, your x term goes second, and your constant goes last. Now I can write my A, B, and C. So Connor, can you give me my A value? Gabrielle, can you give me my B value? And Evelyn, can you give me my C value? Again, Connor, you're giving me my A value. Gabrielle, you're giving me my B value. And Evelyn, you're giving me my C value. Connor, we got our A value. There you go, Gabrielle. You caught yourself. Good job. 8 is our B value, and 3 is our C value. Thank you, you guys. Okay, so now I have everything. Now I'm going to plug it into my formula. So anywhere I see an A, B, or C, I'm replacing it with those numbers. And remember, we always, always, always have to put parentheses around those numbers. So here I go. Instead of the B, I'm going to put 8. This 4 is part of my formula, so I include that. But then we get to this A. And A also happens to be 4. I'm just putting it in parentheses. And then our C value, 3. Now, again, if you need to use your calculator, there is no shame. If you can do this in your head, that's perfect. Just be careful. I would go through, double check. So 8 squared, if I am squaring 8, that's saying really 8 times 8. Who knows what 8 squared is? If you know it, throw it in the chat. Thank you. We got 64. And then here I'm multiplying -4, 4, and 3. When I multiply that, I am going to get 48. Yes. See, even Miss Carr needs to whip out a calculator every once in a while. Yes, cool. All right, so now I got 64 minus 48. What would my final answer here be for my discriminant? What is my discriminant? 64 minus 48, what do we get? (64 minus 48). Yep, 16. Good job. Okay, now here's where a lot of people circle 16 and they go, whoa, I did it. I'm done. No, we didn't answer the question. The question wants to know the number of solutions we have. We don't have 16 solutions. That's not an option. You either have 0, 1, or 2 solutions. So let's go back to our key. If we go back to our key here, ooh, one too far. I'm on frame 5 for my key. We had a positive 16 as our discriminant. That means that we fall into that first category that says positive. So we are going to have 2 solutions. So back on my problem, and I'm not going to leave it at 16. I'm going to say that there are 2 solutions. Woo! All right. Questions? Can I get a scale of 1 to 5 real quick? 1 to 5. Tell me where you're at. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you, Connor. 1 to 5. Tell me where you're at. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, Brianna. Gabrielle, where are you at? If you have a question, now is an awesome time to ask as well. All right, I'm going to do one more for those people that aren't at a full 5 yet, but I am going to move a little bit quicker, so stay with me here. I'm on frame 7 of my Jamboard. Again, if you want to follow along, here's our link. So frame 7, I again see this question, how many solutions? That means how many are there? I'm not giving you the solutions. If it asked for the solutions, we'd use that quadratic formula. Since it asks how many, we know we're using our discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac. All right, let's get my A, B, and C. This time it is written in standard form from biggest to smallest. So let's get, Caitlin, can you give me my A value? Brianna, can you give me my B value? And then, sorry, Evelyn, there's only so many of you. I got to pick on you twice. Evelyn, you're giving me my C value. Awesome. We got 5 for our A value. Thank you. 10 for our B value. Evelyn, did you get our C value? Fantastic. 5. All right. So we got 2 5s this time. Fun. So now I'm going to plug in my values. So here we go. Our B is, oh, no, our B is not 5. Our B is 10. Notice I'm putting it in parentheses. Those parentheses are crucial. If that is a negative number, if you don't put parentheses, it will drastically change your answer. We have minus 4. Instead of our A, we put 5. Instead of our C, we put 5. We have 2 5s in a row, but they're different variables. And now we simplify. 10 squared is just 10 times 10, which I hope we all know is 100. And then what about negative 4 times 5 times 5? What do we get there? Anybody get that one for me? Thank you. I got negative 100. Oh my gosh. So I have 100 minus 100. That's going to give me 0, which seems like it's a little bit too perfect. And oftentimes we're tempted, we see this 0 and we go, oh, no solution. Go back to our key. Let's go back to frame 5. If we get an answer of 0, how many solutions do we have, you guys? Type it in the chat. How many solutions do we have? We have 1 solution. So I'm going to go back to my problem. Not 0. That is probably the most common mistake I see. I got 1 solution, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to tell you as my answer, 1. That is the ugliest one I've ever written in my life. Here we go. 1 solution. Woo! We did it. All right. I want you guys to try this next one. Ready, set, go. So this next one, we're on frame 8. Let me put the link in the chat one more time. I am going to call on a couple people. I will tell you, be aware that equation, there's something a little funky about it. You're going to have to do a little bit of adjusting before you start plugging and chugging. I'll play some music while you're working too.